Hello everyone and welcome to my first video of 2024. As an OP fan, it doesn't get much better than starting off the new year with the most beautifully stylistic opening that this series has ever had in terms of visuals. The way the animation sets the tone for the Egghead arc is incredible. It made me think of the opening sequence to a video game, which, given the fact that there's a lot of technology involved in Egghead, it fits perfectly. Also, I like being reminded of the idiocy of the Marines just leaving a whole ton of books from the library of the Tree of Knowledge in a giant hole. Megumi Ishitani, who also directed opening 25 as well as some of the best episodes in this anime, was also in charge of this one, and it kind of makes me suspect that she might be a huge Admiral fan, because both of the openings that she's been in charge of feature a short but majestic clip of animation of an Admiral looking like an absolute boss. I had a friend send me a message saying that Borsalino looks like a shiny Pokemon in the opening, and I thought, well, the name of his devil fruit is the Pika Pika no Mi. And speaking of interesting visuals, there's a shot of Vivi that turns into a shot of Bonnie reaching towards Kuma's memories, which got a lot of people to think about the theory of Vivi being the one who possibly inherits Kuma's devil fruit power. That's where a lot of people's minds went. But for me, the first thought I had was, wait, since we know that Vivi is quote unquote a member of the Straw Hat Pirates, does Vivi turning into Bonnie mean that Luffy is going to eventually ask Bonnie to become an honorary member of the crew as well? Now, in terms of symbolism, there's a lot of repeated butterfly imagery when it comes to the character of Imu. I didn't think about it too much when the character was first introduced, but now I feel like it's way too much and it's always kind of in your face for it to not mean anything. So it got me thinking about the butterfly effect, which is the idea that a seemingly small occurrence, such as a butterfly flapping its wings, can end up having a major effect, such as creating a tsunami. Now, the reason why myself and a whole bunch of other people thought that we would hear Imu's voice in the episode where the Mother Flame weapon is used to destroy Lulusia is because if you read the manga chapter where that happens, which is 1060, the dialogue about Lulusia never existing is actually placed over panels that switch between Sabo and Imu. And so even though the Gorosei do appear in the manga chapter, they are not shown along with the piece of dialogue, so it's very easy to interpret the text as being said by Imu rather than one of the elders. Regardless though, Imu's real voice should be heard in the upcoming episodes that cover what happened to King Cobra and Sabo during the Reverie. By the way, if you've been watching some of my recent videos, you know that I've been talking more and more about how the One Piece and the Will of D and the Secrets of the Ancient Kingdom and Joy Boy all seem to have some degree of connection with a race of people that came from outer space. And so I paused the episode to get this screenshot of Imu, and the silhouette of his or her design just reminds me a lot of E.T., especially the proportions of the eyes in relation to the face. It just seems very alien-like. Speaking of villains, the official translation of Saturn's dialogue from the previous chapter makes it sound like the experiment that gave Bonnie her devil fruit powers and the experiment that gave her and Ginny the sapphire scale disease were two different experiments that were conducted separately. Plus, the translation also served to clarify that neither Imu nor Saturn can be Bonnie's biological father, because Saturn reveals that Ginny became the 8th wife of a fellow in the Holy Land. And we know that Imu is supposed to be a secret to the world, so I don't think that Saturn is even allowed to talk about Imu, and even if he was, I doubt that he would refer to Imu as just a fellow. So again, I'll reiterate that I fully support the idea that Bonnie is actually the biological daughter of one of Shanks' siblings, who is also a member of the Holy Knights. Additionally, I like how the anime has been subtly stressing Usopp's observation haki. For example, he's the first one to notice the shark in the water, and then at one point he also warns Frankie about some torpedoes being fired towards the Sunny. I was also recently rewatching the scene where Luffy tells his crew what his secret dream is, and I know romance is a very minimal part of the series as a whole, but the way Nami looks at Luffy when Luffy shares what his dream is kind of gives me that romantic undertone and romantic vibes. Think about it this way. So imagine you're a guy talking to a girl and you just reveal what your life's purpose is to her, what your goals are in life, and she gives you this look. What would you think? Also, the anime reminded me of the fact that Sabo's favorite food is ramen, and so I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because Junko Takeuchi, who does the voice for Naruto, also does the voice for young Sabo. So I wonder if that's where Oda was going with that. Meanwhile, in Manga Land, Oda continues to be consistent in regards to how he writes two characteristics about Sanji. The first one is that he has this affinity to be generous and charitable towards mice, and then the other thing is that Oda loves giving Sanji really cool looking fight entrances. Frankie makes use of Kizaru's light power to bust a hole right through Saturn's chest, and so that gives us a pretty good taste of what it would look like if Kizaru were ever to change his mind and betray Saturn and attack him. After that, Kizaru sends Frankie flying with a pretty smooth looking light kick, and I was once again reminded of the light gloves that were introduced in the very beginning of the arc by Atlas, so I'm wondering if it would benefit Frankie at this point to put them on and engage in some good old-fashioned Frankie boxing. Regardless, Kizaru's state of mind as being conflicted cannot be overstated. I think his feelings throughout all of this have to be very similar to what Kuzan was feeling during the fight against Garp. I'm really grateful that Papa Bear's fist connects with Saturn's Saturn's face, and we actually got to see the full impact of it. I thought those panels were really well drawn. That being said, because Oda is incapable of saying no to any opportunity that he has to hype Luffy up, the attack itself is very clearly a visual homage and reference to Luffy punching Charlie in the auction house. So it feels like the same attack, but with different characters and drawn from a different angle. And thanks to Kuma's flashback, now we know that Kuma had taken a peek inside of the human house and witnessed the aftermath of Luffy punching Charlos. So again, Oda's just very clear on wanting to make Luffy the source of every good action and inspiration for good things to happen. So to me, that scene of Bonnie reconnecting with her father and her saying that she saw who her mother was in the memories and that she also knows that Kuma was sending her letters, that to me was the real emotional punch of the chapter. It just hits different having Bonnie call Kuma her dad and Ginny her mom within the same piece of dialogue. Now in the panel where we see Saturn regenerating his arm, we see some swirling energy coming out of it, and that reminds me of three things. First is obviously the swirl patterns that we see on Double Fruits, but the second thing it reminds me of is the swirls that we see above the silhouettes of the Holy Knights when they're first sort of mentioned by Dragon. And then thirdly, the swirls also remind me of when Sanji activates his exoskeleton for the first time, because his body's being crushed by Queen in sort of like this boa constrictor mode, and we get a glimpse of the same sort of spiraling energy emanating in that panel. And on that note, on the panel where we see Saturn regrowing, regenerating his arm, he makes it very clear that he doesn't understand what love is, because he calls love a flaw in the human form, an error in the programming, which supports the idea that I've had ever since I saw him transform, which is that Saturn is not actually human. Now, the reason for why this relates to Sanji is because if you remember, that's kind of what Judge wanted to do with his children. He wanted to pull out all of the emotions out of them so that they wouldn't be weak, according to him. So it could be that Oda's drawing a visual connection between Saturn's swirls and what he says, right? How he's super emotionless and doesn't understand love. And then the swirls in the Sanji scene where he activates this power that his brothers are known for, who also happen to be deprived of emotions. And then the panel with the Holy Knights / God Knights, if it turns out that one of them is actually Bonnie's biological father, if one of them is responsible for kidnapping Ginny and forcing her into marriage, then that would also mean that they don't understand what love is either. I'm also a little bit more hopeful about the prospect of Kuma possibly being able to make it out of Egghead alive, but I'm also not holding my breath.
Don't give me hope.
Because I feel like when it comes to Kuma, his most noticeable character trait is that he's willing to sacrifice himself for others. And we have a Buster Call coming in, and from what we can tell, Kuma can't really move, although he still has the power of his Pawpaw Fruit, which could probably be used if he wanted to do something crazy here. Additionally, it seems that Luffy has left the chat, and I saw a post saying that the floor around him, the last time we saw him, was sort of swampy, attributing that to Caribou. That being said, we know that at least 2 of the Blackbeard pirates are probably in Egghead Island already, so maybe it's a coordinated team effort between Caribou and the Blackbeard pirates that explains Luffy's absence. And speaking of the Blackbeard pirates, I think this is a pretty good time to look at the remaining plot points that are left to be resolved before we can leave. So in addition to the Light Gloves, Luffy's absence, the Blackbeard pirates, and Caribou's role, which I've already mentioned, we still have the mysterious metal giant from the Ancient Kingdom that suddenly woke up at play. We also have the artificial diamonds that Nami found, which she said that she was going to go back to get. Jewelry-wise, we also have the sapphire necklace that Kuma left to Bonnie. Vegapunk says that it's a good luck charm, but now that we know that Kuma's not going to self-destruct like a bomb, I really wonder what the necklace's purpose is going to be, what it's going to allow Bonnie to do, or what it's going to protect her from. I also think there needs to be a scene where both Kuma and Bonnie recognize Luffy as the next coming of Nika. I also think we need to get a more in-depth explanation of the nature of Saturn's powers, as well as what it is that the Buccaneer lineage allows Kuma to actually do. Now, these explanations don't necessarily need to happen here before the end of the arc, but it would be much appreciated and helpful if Oda finally decided to stop teasing us and gave us the explanation here. Additionally, there were 2 comments, one made by Stussy and the other one from York, that heavily implied that if a specific room within Egghead were to be destroyed, it would have catastrophic consequences, so we have that to look forward to. Zoro versus Wabluchi has been a victim of the off-screen no me for a while now, so we should be getting a resolution to that as well. And I'm sure there's other details or plot points that need to be addressed that I'm forgetting, but those are the main ones that kind of stand out in my mind, at least for now. Speaking of Zoro, the story that spawned the Zoro kills Kaido theory in Wano has now received an anime adaptation and is available on Netflix. It's a very simple story about the character of Ryuma based off of Oda's one-shot that was published in 1994. before by the name of Monsters. It's super One Piece-y though, because you have the whole theme about the main character wanting to repay being fed, and he ends up saving the town. Ryuma was the world's best swordsman at the time, and he was also known as the king. Unbeknownst to Ryuma himself, he thinks that this character of the king should have the heart of a great warrior, which is another reason for why I think Usopp will eventually get King's Haki. Shusui makes an appearance in the episode as well, and I love the tie-in with Thriller Bark Zombie Ryuma passing down the sword and Zoro saying that, "I wish I could have met you when you were alive." Kind of like the same words that Roger says when he finds the One Piece about Joy Boy. Now, when it comes to the official translation, I just have a couple notes to make about some of the dialogue. First one is that after Kuma punches Saturn, there's a Marine that describes the incident as a slave punching a man who's at the pinnacle of the world. And he calls that a historical atrocity. Now, I'm not saying that that's what the Egghead Incident actually is, but it's interesting to think about the level of defiance that goes into Kuma, who is considered a slave by the world government, actually punching one of the Gorosei. Kind of makes it seem as if the act itself is more defiant than what Luffy did back in Sabaody. But then again, Oda's going to make Luffy outshine everybody. So, we just have to wait and see what he does. On a similar note, by the end of the chapter, Kizaru actually says, "Let's finally end this," to Saturn. And we do know that both admirals and the Gorosei have the ability to call in a buster call, to start a buster call. You know what would be amazing though? If by next chapter Kizaru's like, "Let's end this," and then he just turns around and blows a hole through Saturn's face. That would be 110% worthy of being known as the Egghead Incident. Oh no, an admiral just killed one of the elders. You are my special. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Another interesting piece of dialogue comes from Vegapunk saying that Kuma should currently be in a total vegetative state without the ability to act on his own free will or even carry out orders. And he was having trouble speaking when he was with Dragon and the Revolutionaries, but what's interesting about that scene is that Dragon also gave him an order back then, and it seemed like Kuma was about to respond to it. So was it the Buccaneer lineage, or was it Dragon's command that helped revive Kuma? Or was it a combination of both? Because the way I'm thinking about Dragon's words to Kuma is similar to Luffy's ability to be able to revive the ancient giant. Could this possibly be related to Luffy's family, or the will of D even? Because the thing about Saturn is that, he doesn't know why Kuma is doing this either, which means that he does not understand the true power of the Buccaneer race, which makes sense because the Buccaneers were sympathizers with Joy Boy, right? He also stated that he did a lot of research with the Toshi Toshi no Mi, which to me implies that at least initially, the Gorosei really didn't understand the true nature of devil fruits, which goes back to my speculation about Joy Boy being the original creator of devil fruits. So it kind of makes it seem as if in winning the war during the Void Century, the world government wiped out the Buccaneers, the Lunarians, and Joy Boy, but because of the blind hatred towards them, they ended up missing out on a lot of very valuable information. That's usually what happens when we refuse to understand somebody. We miss out on the good things about them. But anyway, I just want to say thank you to all of you watching this right now. I know it's been a while since I posted a video, in part because there hadn't been a chapter, but also because I was feeling kind of burned out by the end of the year. And then I realized that I wasn't the only one feeling this way, because some pretty big YouTubers recently decided that they were going to step away from YouTube, that they were leaving. And even though I have no plans to do the same thing, I can't say that I blame them, because YouTube has changed a lot. I've said this before and I'll say it again. At the heart of it, YouTube is a business, and it's in the business's interest to grow and to make profit, right? And so over the years, I feel like it's changed, I would say kind of for the better if you're a viewer, but kind of for the worst if you're a creator. And the reason I say that is a very simple metric that YouTube uses to recommend your videos. So the whole point of YouTube is to get people to stay on the site for as long as possible. That's why they got rid of the dislike button. They didn't say like this when they explained the reasoning. They gave sort of like a more diplomatic answer. But I think at the heart of it, that's what happened. Because think about it. If you click on a video and you see the like to dislike ratio, and you notice that the video actually has more dislikes than likes, what are you more likely to do? X out of it, right? You're probably going to think, oh, this is probably not worth my time. So I'll just close the window or, go watch something else, which is what YouTube doesn't want. So now you only have the likes to make that decision about whether or not to actually stay and watch the video. So if you click on a video now and the video has, let's say, like 1,000 likes, you're probably going to stay and watch it for longer because you don't know that it actually has 20,000 dislikes. A similar thing could also be seen with the search bar. I don't know how it is for you, but whenever I type something up on the search bar and I hit search, I get a couple of results that actually relate to what I typed in. But if I scroll further down, I get a bunch of videos recommended to me that have nothing to do with what I typed in. Why? Because again, the whole point is to get you to stay on the site for longer. So even if the search results at the bottom are completely irrelevant to what you typed in, YouTube has sort of decided that you are more likely to stay on the site if it recommends you that content. So when it comes to being in the shoes of a creator, things are different now in the sense that YouTube is sort of pushing you to come up with psychological tactics to get people to watch your stuff for longer, which can be very exhausting, especially when you have a channel that revolves around weekly One Piece chapters. Because even though the majority of the One Piece content that has come out recently has been very good, there have been some chapters where I could literally summarize what happened in 2 or 3 sentences. So whenever I read one of those, I'm like, okay, what do I talk about? What do I say to make this interesting? And so I end up thinking about that for 3 days straight until I publish the video. And so what was once a hobby has now turned into an obsession. And that's also on top of my job that has me dealing with, people that are going through a lot. Let's just put it that way. And I love being a counselor. I know deep down that that's my vocation. That's my purpose. But it can be very draining if you don't take care of yourself. All of this to say, thank you so much for being patient with me. I'm sorry if I bored you with this rant that has very little to do with One Piece, but I just felt like I needed to get it out, especially because some YouTubers were stepping away. So hopefully what I said allowed you to gain a little bit more behind the scenes insight into the whole thing. And yeah, again, I don't expect to make that same decision, at least not for now, unless they tell me something in my job and they're going to up my hours or something like that. But yeah, just know that that's kind of what's going on. And I appreciate you. Thank you to all the people that followed me on Instagram when I requested it in the previous video. Thank you all in general for everything you do for the channel, for all the likes and subscriptions. I really appreciate you. Take care. Have a great week. Catch you guys later. Bye.